So we saw that how in France, with the formation of National Assembly, the constitution was also drafted. This constitution brought and declared and established the rights of all citizens in France. So as a result, a constitutional monarchy was formed. But with the formation of this National Assembly and Declaration of Rights, it did not bring ultimate solution to the turmoil or the chaos that was happening in France. So the situation in France continued to remain very tense. A lot of things were happening both in the cities as well as in the villages. Peasants were still fighting, people in Paris were still fighting. So let us see what happened. Louis XVI entered into a secret negotiation with the King of Prussia. So as the situation in France, even with after the formation of National Assembly and Declaration of Citizens' Rights, Louis XVI, he went into a secret negotiation. He made a pact, an agreement with the King of Prussia. So the King of Prussia was the neighbor of France. So they made a pact, they made an agreement. And what was this agreement for? Now the rulers of the neighboring countries, the rulers from the neighboring countries of France, they were looking at and they were well informed of what was happening in France. The kind of attack of the common people towards the king, and the formation of National Assembly and the drafting of constitution. So the neighboring rulers were looking at all these developments and they were worried, they were not happy as to how these developments were taking place and changes were being brought by the people, not the rulers but by the common people. And these rulers of the neighboring countries were very worried. And as a result of this worry of the neighboring countries, these rulers, they planned to send military troops. They planned to send their military forces to stop these developments. They did not like these changes coming up. They did not like the king's powers being limited by the constitution. So they wanted to stop these developments. And these developments, as we know, had been taking place since the summer of the year 1789. So as a result of this worry and their plan to stop these changes and developments in the French society, Louis XVI had entered into a secret agreement or a secret negotiation with the King of Prussia. Now the National Assembly also of course came to know about this secret pact agreement and their plan, the plan of King of Prussia. So in April 1972, the National Assembly, before Prussia and other neighboring rulers could attack, they declared war against Prussia and Austria, two of the neighboring countries of France. So the National Assembly, they stepped forward, and before they could be attacked by these neighboring rulers, they declared a war. Now thousands of men from France volunteered to join the army to fight. When this war was declared, the common people, they joined in large numbers to volunteer and fight in the war for France. And why did they do it? Why did they join in such large numbers? Because they saw this war as a war between people like them, the common people who until then did not have any rights, who until then only suffered, and the rich people, they enjoyed all the privileges and benefits. So this war was seen by the common people as a war not between France and the neighboring rulers, but between people like them, common people like them, and the kings and the aristocracies. So they saw this war as a war between the poor people against the richer, wealthier people. And during this war, as this war was going on, these volunteers or the common people who joined the war to fight against Prussia and Austria, they sang many patriotic songs, songs to encourage their participations, songs to encourage in the motive, in their purpose of this fight. And one of them was Marseillaise. So this was one of the patriotic songs, and it was composed by a poet named Rue de Lille. So this was the name of the poet who composed the song, patriotic song named Marseillaise. Now it was sung for the first time. This Marseillaise was sung by the volunteers for the first time when they were marching from Marseille to Paris. So as they marched from one of the places in outside Paris, which is called Marseille to Paris, so during this march they continued singing this song, patriotic song called Marseillaise. Marseillaise is now the national anthem of France. So now you know, if somebody asks the history behind how the national anthem of France came to be as what it is today, then you can say that it was first sung during the French Revolution by the common people of France when they were marching from Marseille to Paris to fight against the kings and the aristocracies and the military troops from Prussia and Austria. Of course, the war and the revolution, it brought losses and economic difficulties. You can imagine if a country and a society undergoes wars and conflict for so many years, then it obviously brings lots of losses, lots of people die, wounded, and other things, and it also brings economic difficulties. So while men volunteered and went away for fighting, women, they earned their livings and they looked after their families. So it was the women who took the responsibility to take care of their homes and their families. Large number of people believed that the revolution had to be carried further. That is why the people did not complain. People continued their own lives, living their own lives in whatever position they were. The men continued to join and volunteer for the war, and the women, without any complaint, they took care of the house, they earned their livings, they fed their children. So they did everything because all the people believed that this revolution had to be carried on. This revolution should not come to an end, but it had to be continued. And why? Why did they have such strong belief? Because the Constitution of 1791, the Constitution which was drafted by the National Assembly, it only gave rights to the richer section of the society. We know that the Constitution gave rights, or by the law of the Constitution, only people, those people who were rich enough to pay their taxes, who owned properties, who were wealthy, they could only vote and others could not vote. So it benefited, it was good for the richer people, and the poor people remained poor and they did not have the rights to vote. So as a result of this, many political clubs, many groups, associations, clubs were formed, and in these clubs people discussed about the government policies, the kind of laws, the kind of regulations, the kind of rights that the National Assembly provided and gave the people of France. So these kinds of policies of the government were discussed and they planned their actions. So obviously people, the poor people, still had complaints. Their needs had not been addressed. It was only the rich who could vote. It was only the rich who benefited despite the formation of the Constitution. So in these clubs that were formed during this time, these needs, these grievances were discussed and their actions were planned. They decided what to do now, how to make our voices heard, how to demand our needs to the government. So all these were discussed and planned in the political clubs. There were many clubs that came up during this time, but the most successful among these clubs was the Jacobin Club. Now this Jacobin Club, the name of the club Jacobin, was named after the former convent of Saint Jacob in Paris. So after the name of this convent, the Jacobins, the followers or the members of the Jacobin Club, named their club Jacobin. Now we saw how women were not treated equally and the condition of the women did not improve in the revolution. But what were they doing? We saw that they were taking care of the house, they were earning their living, they were feeding the children. So they were doing all kinds of work, which means they did not have any complaints and they actively participated in the revolution. So we see that women were very active throughout the revolution. There was not even a single time where the women stepped back and did not participate. They were very active. They also, like men and other people, formed their own clubs.
Now, subscribe to Bright Tutee course at ₹1 per day only. Download Bright Tutee app from Play Store and get the online courses prepared by competent and experienced teachers for different education boards of classes 6 to 10. Bright Tutee courses are available for the subjects of Math, Science, Social Science, English and Hindi in English and Hindi medium. Bright Tutee follows 3-step approach, that is learning, assessment and exam preparation. In learning, topic-wise video lectures with explanation of concepts and discussion of textbook examples and questions are available with the solutions. In assessment, topic-wise online MCQ test, practice assignments and chapter-wise question bank are available with the solutions. In exam preparation, previous year's question papers, sample papers and model test papers are available with the solutions. Sign up today on Bright Tutee and avail your courses at affordable prices.
Now, before we go into looking in detail the participation and the role of women in the French Revolution, let us look at the Jacobin Club. What was this Jacobin Club and why was this club one of the most successful clubs during the Revolution? The members of the Jacobin Club were called Jacobins. Who were these Jacobins? Where did these people come from? They belonged to the less prosperous section of the society. So these Jacobins were actually the poorer people of the society. They were less prosperous. They were not wealthy. So they were small shopkeepers, shoemakers, pastry cooks, watchmakers, servants and daily wage workers. So you can see that they were poor people who did not have much wealth and who were not rich and wealthy and powerful people. Now the leader of this club was Maximilien Robespierre. So he was the leader of the Jacobin Club. The Jacobins were led by Maximilien Robespierre. The Jacobins wore long striped trousers. So this was the type of clothing that they wore and distinguished the Jacobins from the rest of the people in France. Now, why did they wear long striped trousers? To set them apart from the nobles who wore knee breeches. Now, the rich men belonging to the wealthier sections of the French society, they wore knee breeches. So these were tightly fitted trousers which were only till the knee. But the Jacobins, they wore long striped trousers, and this trouser distinguished, made them unique or different from the rich and wealthy men who wore knee breeches. By wearing this, they were proclaiming that the power no longer belonged to the wearers of the knee breeches. So why did the Jacobins wear the stripped trousers and not the trousers that the rich men wore? This was to show that the power no longer now belonged to the richer sections of the society, but it belonged to the Jacobins, or the lesser prosperous, lesser wealthier people of the French societies. So as a result of the kind of clothing that the Jacobins wore, they came to be known as sans-culottes. This was the name that were given to the Jacobins, and it meant those without knee breeches. Now, sans-culottes, along with their very different clothing, they also wore red caps, and this symbolized liberty. If you remember, just before this section, we spoke about some of the symbols that were used during the French Revolution by the people, by the revolutionaries, and one of them was red caps. So the Jacobins wore red caps, and this symbolized freedom, liberty. But however, despite all these developments and active participation of women, women were not allowed to do all these things. Women were not allowed to wear stripped trousers like the Jacobins. They were not allowed to wear red caps, which symbolized freedom. Women women were treated differently, and despite their efforts, they could not take as effective part as the men took during the revolution. Now, in the summer of 1792, the Jacobins planned an insurrection. They planned a rebellion, a protest, a bigger protest of a large number of Parisians from the people of Paris. Now, these Paris were very angry. Why? Because food was limited. There was shortage of food. Food was scarce, and because of the scarcity and the shortage of food grains, their prices were very high. So because of this, the people were very angry, and taking advantage of this angry people who had a lot of complaints to make and needs to be met, the Jacobins planned an insurrection. They planned a rebellion, an attack in the summer of 1792. So what was this rebellion? What was this insurrection? In the morning of 10th August 1792, they stormed, the people along with the Jacobins, stormed the palace of the Tuileries and killed king's guards and captured the king. So this was the insurrection that the Jacobins did along with the angry crowds of the French society. They stormed the palace, they killed the king's guards, and they also captured the king. Later, when the National Assembly came to know about this, so a meeting was held, and in this meeting, all the representatives voted. Now, if you remember, in the meeting, everyone could vote. Of course, you must remember, not all the citizens were allowed to vote. Only those above 25 years of age and who paid taxes, they were allowed to vote. But these people who voted, they said they voted for the imprisonment of the royal family. So in this National Assembly, they said that the royal family, the family of the king, had to be imprisoned, put behind the bar. And elections were also held after that. There were new elections, new people were elected, new groups were elected. Now, all men of 21 years and above, earlier it was 25 years above. Now, all men 21 years and above, regardless of their wealth, could vote. So after this attack, insurrection by the Jacobins along with the people, they captured the royal family. And then a meeting was held and as a result of this meeting, the royal family was imprisoned, and after that, new elections were held. So it was decided in this meeting that now people, men of 21 years and above, regardless of how much wealth or how much tax he paid or he did not pay, could vote. Now the newly elected assembly. So there was a new election, and this new election elected a new body. And this new body earlier, which was called National Assembly, was now called the Convention. So from National Assembly, this body, political body, which governed the French society and the people, became Convention, came to be known as Convention. On 21st September 1792, this convention, the newly formed assembly, it abolished the monarchy and declared France as a republic. So earlier the National Assembly had declared that France was a constitutional monarchy. The king was still an important figure in France, but his powers were limited, and the constitution now governed France. That is why it was called constitutional monarchy. But now with the coming of convention, the convention abolished this monarchy. They got rid of king and his position in the French society, and hence they declared France as a republic. No king anymore. Now, what is a republic? You must be wondering. Now, let's see what republic means. Republic is a form of government, a system of governing a country and its people, where people elect the government. The people are responsible to elect who rules them, including the head of the government. So, in the republic, the people elect, they cast their votes, and with their votes they elect who they want to govern them. So the government is elected by the people, and in this government they also elect the leader or the head of the government. So basically now it's the people, the common people or the citizens of France who are responsible to elect the government who they wanted to rule them. And it means that there is no hereditary monarchy. The position of king. So earlier when the king ruled France, so after the king dies, the son, the next heir that we call heir, he becomes the king. Again, after this king dies, his son, the heir, becomes the king. So this system of coming up of the son or the progeny of the king is called hereditary. Now this hereditary system of coming to power of the king, of the monarchy, was brought to an end. Now as a result of this, as a result of Jacobins coming to power, forming the convention and abolishing the monarchy by declaring France as a republic, what did it do? Louis XVI, the king of France, who was imprisoned by the Jacobins, he was sentenced to death on the charge of treason. On the charge of betraying the nation and its people, Louis XVI, the king of France, was sentenced to death. On 21st January 1793, he was executed. He was killed in the public at a place called Place de la Concorde. So this was the place where the king was executed amongst the public people. Queen Marie Antoinette, who was the Queen of France, wife of Louis XVI, she also met with the same fate shortly after. She was also executed just like his husband in a public place.
Now, subscribe to Bright Tutee course at ₹1 per day only. Download Bright Tutee app from Play Store and get the online courses prepared by competent and experienced teachers for different education boards of classes 6 to 10. Bright Tutee courses are available for the subjects of Math, Science, Social Science, English and Hindi in English and Hindi medium. Bright Tutee follows three-step approach, that is learning, assessment and exam preparation. In learning, topic-wise video lectures with explanation of concepts and discussion of textbook examples and questions are available with the solutions. In assessment, topic-wise online MCQ test, practice assignments and chapter-wise question bank are available with the solutions. In exam preparation, previous year's question papers, sample papers and model test papers are available with the solutions. Sign up today on Bright Tutee and avail your courses at affordable prices.